Hello everyone, my name is Kumar and welcome back to our channel Kumar Programming. In our previous video, we have seen how to write the unit test cases, and I have created a pipe where I have transformed the value in a reverse order. Then after that, I have created the required test cases for that pipe. After that, I have created a service, author service. In author service, I am fetching the data from our API, and then I have handled the error as well. Further, we have created the required test cases for our service, author service, for its positive as well as its negative scenario, where we are fetching the data, and here where we are handling the error in case of any error occurs in our service. And in this we have learned about describe, before each, configure testing module, test bed, inject, true bit true the, it, expect plus, to equal, expect one, and many more. And then after that we have seen how to run the test cases in our Karma runner. Okay, so if you have not gone through the first part of this video, then I would request you to please go through with that first, so you will learn from the scratch. Link is given below in the description box. And if you have not subscribed this channel, please subscribe it and don't forget to press the bell icon so you will never miss an update for all of my upcoming videos. Now let's move further ahead with our author component. Now let's open the terminal. Now let's create a component, ng generate component, and we are going to create author component inside our components folder. So here I'll create a components, and then I'll give the author. Okay, now it's going to generate my author component inside component folders. So if you see here, inside our app folders, we have a components folder, and inside this component folder, my author component is created. Okay, now let's go to the author component.ts file first and fetch the data from our author service. So here we will use the constructor, and inside this constructor we are going to inject our author service. So private, and we know how to inject our service, right? So here we will give author service, type of author service. Here now we have created our constructor and we have injected our author service inside our constructor. Okay, now we are going to create a method as a get author, and inside that method we are going to fetch the data from our service. Okay, so this dot author service dot get authors. Now we know if you want to fetch the data from the service, we have to use subscribe, and inside this subscribe we have three callback function. First one is for data, so let's go with the data first. Fat arrow function, here we are going to get the authors. So here I'll create for authors, and I'll put type as a any. Okay, in this author I'm going to save the data. Okay, so this dot authors equal to data. Okay, now I have assigned our data to our authors. Now let's handle the error as well. So if we get the error, we know in our subscribe method we have first success, then error, and then complete. Okay, three callback functions are there. So here in the error we are going to pass the error message. So here I'll take another variable as a error message. Let's give as a any, and initially I'm going to pass it as a blank. Okay, now here this dot error message, now I'm going to pass it as a service error. Okay, now we are done with our get authors method. Now we have to call this method inside our ng on init. Okay, so here implements on init, and now here implement the ng on init from on init interface. Now here I'm going to call this dot get authors. Okay, and once we have received this author data from our author service, we have to bind this into our author component HTML page. So now let's bind our authors data over here. So I'll take a ULLI over here, and in this li I'm going to make a loop. Okay, so we know we are going to use our ng for star ng for, and here in the item I'm going to make as a author, and then here in the second option we have author list. Okay, so here we have our authors, and what exactly we are going to display in this. So we are going to display here author's name. Okay, author dot name, right? As well as we have to show our error message as well. So here I'll give a span, and in this span I'll pass the error message in case we have error message. Let's make it on top. Now let's save it. Now let's open another terminal. Now let's run this application. So ng serve -o is going to open in the browser. We won't be able to call this our author page because we have not added this in our router. So now let's add the router for our author page over here. Meanwhile it's building. So inside this author I'm going to, error message does not exist on the author component. So let's see what is the message we have given over here. This is error message. Okay, so we will give the same message over here. Okay, now let's go back to our routing module. Here we will create a route for our author. So we know how to do that path, and then we have to give the router name. So I'll give router name as a author, and then we have to give the which component it needs to be bind with this route. Okay, so here component, and component needs to bind with the author component. Okay, that's all. Now it's compiled successfully. Now let's see if it is running successfully. So here localhost 4200, and now let's go to the author page. So in the author, however, it's not going to the author page. Let's see what is the issue. Open your developer tools. Here if you see uncaught HTTP client, no provider for HTTP client, this is very common error. So go to our app module, and here you have to provide our HTTP client module. Okay, now save it. Let's go back to our page and author. Now if you see here at the bottom, author work. Okay, but we are not getting the data from our service because our service is not running. Now let's run our service as well. So this is my library API. Now let me run this nodemon src server.ts file. So now our API is running. Now let's go back and refresh this page. Still we are getting error. If li is an angular component, it has a ng for off. Okay, so it's some issues with our ng for author component html. Okay, here I have given double star. That could be the issue. Yep, now let's save it and let's go back to our page. Yeah, so if you see here, all of my authors are getting displayed over here. As of now, we are not required all these information, so let me just remove it quickly. Go to our app component HTML page. That is the default details are given over there, so I'll remove it quickly from there. So I'll keep the banner there, and I'll remove all those things. Card container, hidden selection, terminal, card container, footer. Yeah, actually I was looking for the router outlet, so router outlet is given at the bottom side, so we are good to remove all those things. Or we can have this content div, and we can remove everything from this content div. Okay, and we can move our router outlet to inside our content div. Okay, here I'm keeping my style for now. Now let's save it and let's see how exactly it look like. Yeah, so author works and list of all the author details are loading. Now we are going to write the test cases for it. Now let's go back to our application, go to our author component.spec.ts file. Here if you see, already we have a test suite as an author component. Already I have explained about the describe, from where we are creating our test suite, and here we have before each, this before each being configured for each and every test cases, and each and every test cases are being created by it method. Okay, and inside that we have a 3A pattern: arrange, act and assert. Okay, and this to be truth is going to check if this component is being initialized or not. Now let me explain you a little bit. This test bed configuration, that is going to configure our testing module, and in this testing module we have to configure our all the components and inject our services. Okay, so here I'm using our author component, so here I have to give a declaration author component, then fixture. Its test bed is going to create the component from our author component. So this fixture is having our component, then fixture.component instance is going to create the component, and here fixture.detect changes is going to detect any changes is being happening on the page or not. Okay, and this is a test cases, that framework is already being provided. Now we are going to create other test cases. So first of all, we are going to use our HTTP client module. So here we have to import HTTP client testing module. Similarly, we have a testing module for HTTP client here in our test bed as well. And we have to add inside our square bracket, because here we can add our multiple modules. Now we have to provide the reference for our service as well. So here we know how to provide providers. Inside providers, we have to give the reference for our service. Okay, so we are going to use author service. Now I'm going to create a variable over here. Let service type of author service. Okay, and here I'm going to instantiate our service equal to testbed dot inject. Already we have learned in our previous video author service. Okay, so now we have injected our author service and instantiated. So now in this service we are having our author service object. Okay, now we have configured before each. Now let's create our test cases. So here I'm going to create a test case with method it, and I'll give the test case name over here. It should fetch the data, the main functionality. It should fetch the data from service and display it. Okay, should fetch data from author service and display it. Okay, and we have to pass a fat arrow function over here. Now inside that we will write our test case. So first of all, what we have to do, we have to arrange the data. Okay. So here arrange, create a variable over here, const, let me give as a test data, or let me give as a author data, and that would be equal to be an array of objects. Now here I will give name. I told you we can give it anything over here. So here I'll give the test author 1. Similarly, I'll create another object, and here I'll give the test author name 2. Okay. Now we are going to fetch the data from service, right? So we are not going to actually fetch the data from the service. So what we have to do, we have to spy on. Actually, there is a method spy on. So spy on basically allow dynamically intercepting to a function call and change the result dynamically. Okay. So now let's see what does it mean. We have a spy on method over here, and in this spy on, I'm going to spy on a method for our author service, and for which method I'm going to spy on, it's a get authors. Okay. So I'm not going to call the actual service. Okay. I'm spying on the service method get authors, and then I'm going to return some value. Then and dot, we have a method over here as a return value. Okay. And here I'm going to return our this author data. Okay. So here we have off. So this should return observable. So here we have from RxJS library of, which will return the observable. So here of author data. Okay. Now let's import it from our RxJS. Yep. So now this is going to return an observable, and we are spying on get authors method. Okay. We have arranged our data. Now we have to call our ng on init, right? So fixture dot detect changes is going to call our ng init as well. Okay. Because we are loading our data on ng init. Okay. Now further, so this is our action actually. Now further we have to do the assertion. Okay. So in the assertion, first of all, we have to find out our list item is being binded or not. Okay. So here if you see in our author component, now we are testing our component as well, HTML part. So this could be the part of integration. Okay. So here we are not testing only the component individual functionality. Moreover, here we are testing for our author component HTML page as well. Okay. So now let's go back to our spec.ts, and here we have to find out our list item component. Okay. So we have to find out these components in our spec file. So let's see how to find this. So I'm going to const list item, and then from fixture dot, there is a property as a native element. So native element dot query selector all. Okay. Query selector all. And what we are going to select over here, we are going to select li. Okay. This is our li tag. So it's going to fetch all the li tag from our components. Okay. Now what we are going to expect, the first thing, so expect this list item dot length equal to our author data length. Okay. So this list item dot length to be our author data dot length. Okay. So first of all, we are going to use our HTTP client module. So here we have to import HTTP client testing module. Similarly, we have a testing module for HTTP client here in our test bed as well. And we have to add inside our square bracket, because here we can add our multiple modules. Now we have to provide the reference for our service as well. So here we know how to provide providers. Inside providers, we have to give the reference for our service. Okay. So we are going to use author service. Now I'm going to create a variable over here. Let service type of author service. Okay. And here I'm going to instantiate our service equal to testbed dot inject. Already we have learned in our previous video author service. Okay. So now we have injected our author service and instantiated. So now in this service, we are having our author service object. Okay. Now we have configured before each. Now let's create our test cases. So here I'm going to create a test case with method it, and I'll give the test case name over here. It should fetch the data, the main functionality. It should fetch the data from service and display it. Okay. Should fetch data from author service and display it. Okay. And we have to pass a fat arrow function over here. Now inside that we will write our test case. So first of all, what we have to do, we have to arrange the data. Okay. So here arrange, create a variable over here, const, let me give as a test data, or let me give as a author data, and that would be equal to be an array of objects. Now here I will give name. I told you we can give it anything over here. So here I'll give the test author 1. Similarly, I'll create another object and here I'll give the test author name 2. Okay, now we are going to fetch the data from service, right? So we are not going to actually fetch the data from the service. So what we have to do, we have to spy on. Actually there is a method spy on. So spy on basically allow dynamically intercepting to a function call and change the result dynamically. Okay, so now let's see what does it mean. We have a spy on method over here, and in this spy on I'm going to spy on a method for our author service, and for which method I'm going to spy on, it's a get authors. Okay, so I'm not going to call the actual service. Okay, I'm spying on the service method get authors, and then I'm going to return some value. Then and dot, we have a method over here as a return value. Okay, and here I'm going to return our this author data. Okay, so here we have of. So this should return observable. So here we have from RxJS library of, which will return the observable. So here of author data. Okay, now let's import it from our RxJS. Yep. So now this is going to return an observable, and we are spying on get authors method. Okay, we have arranged our data. Now we have to call our ng on init, right? So fixture dot detect changes is going to call our ng init as well. Okay, because we are loading our data on ng init. Okay, now further, so this is our action actually. Now further we have to do the assertion. Okay, so in the assertion, first of all we have to find out our list item is being binded or not. Okay, so here if you see in our author component, now we are testing our component as well, HTML part. So this could be the part of integration. Okay, so here we are not testing only the component individual functionality. Moreover, here we are testing for our author component HTML page as well. Okay, so now let's go back to our spec.ts, and here we have to find out our list item component. Okay, so we have to find out our these components in our spec file. So let's see how to find this. So I'm going to const list item, and then from fixture dot, there is a property as a native element. So native element dot query selector all. Okay, query selector all, and what we are going to select over here, we are going to select li. Okay, this is our li tag. So it's going to select fetch all the li tag from our components. Okay, now what we are going to expect, the first thing, so expect this list item dot length equal to our author data length. Okay, so this list item dot length to be our author data dot length. Okay, dot length. Okay, now what else that we have to expect, these list item should be having author dot name value. Okay, so now let's see how we can do that. So here I'm just going to copy the same line, expect list item first. Okay, list item, so first list item dot it's having text content. So here we would be having text content, and that needs to contain, here we have to check the contain method, contain, and what it should be containing, it should be containing this test author 1. Okay, so what we can do here, author data, so here we have first author data dot name. Okay, right, and similarly we can do for the second li element as well, it should contain the second author data dot name. Here we have dot. Okay, now here few more things that we have to be taken care, that is we are calling our service that is being asynchronous. Okay, so here we have a function like fake async. Okay, so what we will do, we will use that function fake async, and we will pass this our entire thing inside our fake async method. Okay, now this fake async needs to be imported from our Angular core testing. Okay, since this is a asynchronous call, so we have to use, there is a method tick. Okay, basically this tick method simulate the passage of time to complete the asynchronous operation. Okay, so whatever the time is going to be taken by your asynchronous call is going to simulate that. Okay, so here this and this tick method is also from our Angular core testing. Okay, now what exactly happened here, we have given our data author data, and then we have spy on our service for get author method, and then after that we are calling our ng on init. Okay, and then we are simulating tick and this tick is going to simulate our asynchronous call from the service. And once it's done, then after that we have to call our fixer.detect changes once again, okay, because here we are binding our data. Okay, once data is being binded, then again we have to detect our changes done on the page. Now we are finding our elements, and then we are expecting our author data. Our list item should be binded with our author data, and length of this list item is equal to author data dot length. Okay, so basically here we have two author, so it should be 2. Okay, and then after that we are checking here if our li element is being binded with this specific data or not. Okay, so this is all that we have to do in order to test if our service is fetching data and properly binding to the component or not. Okay, now next thing we have to do our handle the error. Okay, so now let's copy this and we will give the name as should handle error, handle service error gracefully. Okay, let's come to the arrange part. So here we are not required any mock data. Now come to the spy on. So here once we call our get author method and we are returning the value. So here what we have to return? We have to return the observable for error. Okay, so here I'm going to return an new observable, and what we are going to have in this observable is we have a fat arrow function, and here we have observer, and this observer is going to return the error as new error as error occurred. Okay, and this observable needs to import it from our RxJS library. Okay, and this should not be part of actually off, so we will remove the off from here. We are directly returning an observable from here. So yep, so from our service deliberately we are returning an error. Okay, now once we have our error, then we are having our fixer.detect changes. Okay, and tick, I told you that tick is simulate to passes the time to complete our asynchronous call. Okay, now in the assertion we are going to fixer.detect changes. That's fine, and now we have to find our component where we are going to show our error message. Okay, so here I'll find our element const error element, and that would be fixer.native element.query selector. Okay, so here we are not going to, here we are going to select only one element, so here we will use query selector, and what we are going to select, we are going to select a error message. Okay, so here I'll we are going to select by the class, so here I'll use the dot error message, and same class I will give it to our HTML, and here we have span, so here I'll add this class to this span as a error message. Okay, and we are not going to do this, so we will remove it, so we are not required all those lines. So here what we are expecting, this error message, this error element have the content as a service error. Okay, so now let's see, error element dot text content to contain what it needs to contain as a service error. Okay, why it should contain the service error? Because if you see in our author component, here we are giving error message as a in case of any error occurred in our author service, so we have given here service error, so same message needs to be checked in our test cases as well. Okay, now let's format the code, control A, control K, F. Okay, so now it's formatted. So here we have written two test cases, one for fetch the data and bind the data to our HTML. Okay, and now second, that we are checking for its negative scenario when service gets failed and it's binding and our error message span is getting binded with the service error messages or not. Okay, now let's test it if this is working as expected or not. Now let me open another terminal, ng test. Now it's loaded. Now let's see, we have several error over here. So should fetch data from author service and display it. Okay, so it's and expected 0 to be 2. So now let's see what is the error there. So let's see what is the issue here. Here we are calling as a fixer.detect changes. Here we are also calling fixer.detect changes. So basically this query selector all is not able to find this element. So what we have to, okay, so let's comment this fixer.detect changes, and because already we are doing the fixer.detect changes over here. Yeah, it seems like it's being passed. Now let's see. Yeah, so our rest of the test cases have been passed. Now here only one test case is getting failed, that is from our app component. Now let's go back to our app component. Here we have our app component.spec.ts. So if you remember that we have removed all of our elements from our app component HTML page, so it's not getting binded. So it's not finding all those values. So I'm going to remove that test case from here. Should render title. So I'll remove this should render title. Okay, because now we are not having this content span. Already we have removed it. So I will comment it. Rather than commenting, we have another option over here. If you don't want to run this particular test case, you can just make it as a X in front of it. Okay, now what is going to be happen, this test case is going to be ignored. Okay, now let's see that in our karma, refresh it. Yep, all the test case is being passed, and if you see here in our app component, this should render title pending with message temporary disabled. And what else if I want to disable the complete suite? So what we have to do, if we want to disable the complete test cases, so here we can write X in front of describe. Okay, so what is going to happen, it's going to disable the entire test cases from our that particular component. Now let's see here our app component, all the test cases being are disabled. So sometime once we are doing our programming, we are focusing on our specific component and we are not taking care of the other components. In that case, this is very helpful. We can just ignore those test cases and we can focus on the test cases where we are working on. Okay, and what else if we want to execute only a specific test suite and disable all other test cases? So rather than making X for each and every test cases, you can just make it as a EF. Okay, and we will remove the X from here. So what is it is going to happen, it's going to execute this test case and rest of all other test cases is going to be disabled. So now let's go back to our karma. So if you see here, render title, yeah, we have to remove this. Okay, so our so now what it should happen, only these test suites should be executed. Okay, and rest of the other test cases needs to be ignored. Now let's see in our karma. So if you see here, only my app component test cases are getting executed and rest of other test cases are being ignored. However, we are not going to use these test cases. I hope that you are getting idea how to write the test cases and how we have to execute them. Okay, now let me further create a login form and write the test cases for that form as well. Okay, but before that, let's run our coverage report so we can see how much our test cases is being covered so far. So let's go to our now control C in order to terminate our current execution. Now I'll write here ng test and I'll give the code coverage. Okay, now let's run it. Hopefully this should be having 100% code coverage since we have considered our positive as well as negative scenario both. So here basically all the test cases are being disabled. So that's the reason we are getting here the code coverage summary is everything is in red. So now let's enable all of our test cases. So we'll go to our app component where we have disabled our test cases. So here we are going to remove this F and this test case that we are not going to cover. Okay, yeah. So see, now our all the 11 test cases are being passed and our code coverage is 100% for each section, statement, branch and function and line. Okay, and if you see the report here also, all the test cases are being passed here. Okay, now further I'm going to create a login form and I'll give a submit button over there, and then after that I'll write the test cases for that login form as well. Okay, now let's create a login component. Open a terminal here, ng generate component, and we are going to create a login component inside our component folder. Okay, components and then login. So now it's going to create a login component inside our components folder. So now if you see here inside our components folder, we have our login component is created. Now let's go to our login HTML component. Here I'm going to paste a template for our login form. So here I have created a form group as a name as a login form, and on this particular form on ng submit I'm calling on submit function, and here we have a label as a username and an input control. Similarly here we have password and form control we have password. Okay, at the end of this form we are having a submit button for login which is being disabled in case of form is invalid. Okay, now let's go back to our TS file. So inside our login component, let's inject our form builder inside our constructor, private form builder, type of form builder. Okay, and this form builder is imported from Angular form. Okay. Now inside our constructor, we are going to form. Now we are going to build the login form. So here I'll make a variable as a login form, type of form group, and we need to import this form group from Angular form itself. So we'll import from Angular form, and now this login form, this dot login form equal to, we are going to build the form. So this dot form builder dot group, and inside this group we are going to create our control. So we have our control as a username, name, and here we are going to pass as a blank value, and then we are going to give as a validation. So first validation we are going to give as a validator dot required. Here validators also needs to be imported from Angular form itself, and second input and second validation that we have to give as a minimum length for 5 character. Okay, so validators dot min length would be 5. Okay, so this is the validation we have given for the user. Now similarly we are going to create another element for our password. So here we will give password, and here we are just going to give as a required field. Okay, we are not going to give any validation for the length. Okay, that's all done for our form builder. Now let's on click, if you see here on click, we are calling a submit method. So here we are going to call on button click on submit, and inside this submit we are going to check if our login form is valid or not. Okay, if our this dot login form dot valid. Okay, if our form is valid, then we can emit as a value true from here. Okay, now let's create an output variable over here. So I'll give @output as login success, and that would be new event emitter. Okay, so new event emitter, and that would be a type of boolean, and this output decorator needs to be given like this. Okay, now further, once our login form is valid, then we can just emit the true value over here. Okay, so this dot login success dot emit value as a true. Okay, so now we have written the code for a on submit as well. Okay, now let's test it if it's working or not. Ng serve hyphen o. Okay, so it's giving some error. Let's see what exactly the error is. Cannot bind the form group since it's not a property of form. Okay, why this error? This is a very common error because this form is a reactive form. Okay, so we have to add our reactive form module inside our app module. Okay, so here reactive form module. So now if you see, it's built successfully. Now let's see, refresh this page, and here we are going to move to the login page. So it's not going to the login page. Now let's see what is the issue. Control Shift I in order to open our developer tool. So here we have cannot match any route for login. Okay, so why it is coming? Because we have not given any route for our login page. So go to app routing, and here we will give the route for login page as well, and here login component. Okay, now let's go back to our page once again, and here login. So if you see here, now we are able to see our login page, and if you see our login button is disabled. Now I'm going to give the username as a Kumar, and password I'm going to give 12345. Okay, so now our login button is enabled, but we have given a validation over here. If username length is less than 5, then our login button is going to be disabled. Okay, now here we can see what form value once we have submitted our data. So now let's go to our login component. Here we can log our value first, console.log, and we are going to log this dot login form dot value. Okay, now come to the application. Here Kumar and password 12345, and now here login. So if you see here, I'm getting form value as a username Kumar and password 1234, and form is valid. Okay, now we have to write the test cases for this form. So now let's go back to our spec file. Here we have our spec file. Now we need to write the test cases for our login component. So our first test case would be form should be invalid when it's empty. Okay, so we are going to write this. We are going to copy this and paste it. Should invalid when form is empty. Okay, and this would be very simple. Simply we have to check our component dot login form dot valid. Okay, and what we have to check, it shouldn't be truthy. It should be falsy. because initially our login form would be invalid because we have not passed any value to our username and password. Okay, so what we are expecting here, it should be to be falsy, to be falsy. Okay, so this is the one test case. Now we have to check further our fields as well. Okay, so we have two fields, username and password. Okay, so now let me copy this same thing. Should check validity for username. Okay, so let me create a variable over here, const username equal to, we have to find out that username control. Okay, so here component dot login form dot controls, and we can find out our control username. Okay, and what we can check, we have not passed any value inside our username, so it should be falsy initially. Okay, so here username dot, so that's true. Now second thing that we have to check for the valid value. Okay, so what we are going to do, username dot set value, and we are going to set the value over here like Kumar, and what we can expect now, this value should be truthy. Okay, to be truthy, to be truthy. Now the third scenario that we have to test here, if the length of this username value is less than 5. Okay, so what we are going to do, we will copy this the entire thing, paste it, and I'll paste it over here, length as a 4, and then it would be to be falsy. Okay, all the conditions are being checked over here for our username field. Now same we have to check for the password as well. Okay, so I'll just copy it and paste it over here. So check validity for password, and here I'll find the control as a password, and this I'll replace this password dot valid. Initially password would be falsy, and once we are going to enter the password like 12345 6, then this password dot valid to be truthy. Okay, that's all. Here we are not checking any length for our password. And now what the third test case that could be, form should be valid if we have entered the valid value in the both of the fields. Okay, so here I'll give another test case over here, as a form should be valid if both fields are valid. Okay, so here we found our username, so I'll copy this. So here we have our username as well as password. I'm going to set the value inside our user. So we found both of the control, and we have set the value in proper value in username and password. Then what we are expecting, this form component dot login form dot valid to be truthy. Okay, this is our expectation. So here also, if you see, we are using the 3A pattern. Here we are arranging the data, then we are taking the action, and finally we are doing the assertion. Now here the other test case would be, form should emit login success on successful form submission. Okay, so this is our positive case. We have given all the valid values and we are submitting the form. So once we have to submit the form, so our login success event should emit the value. We are not going to call our login success emit event, so we have to spy on that. Okay, so we are using spy on, and where exactly we have to use our spy on, we have to use spy on our component login success event. Okay, so here component dot login success, and on which method that we have to call our spy on, so we can use our emit. Here we can provide the multiple function as well. Now we found our control username and password, then we have passed the proper value. Now we are going to take the action. Okay, and we are going to call our on submit method. Okay, so component dot on submit method that we are going to call, and once we are getting called, then what we are expecting, we are expecting our component dot login success should emit. Okay, dot emit, and what is our expectation is to have been called with, so here you can, several methods are there, like have been called, have been called before, once, with, times, and with. Okay, so here I'm going to use to have been called with true value. Okay, that's it. So this is our positive test case. Now we have to write our negative test case as well. So our form should be disabled in case of invalid value. Okay, so here I'll copy this, and here form should not emit login success on form invalid. Okay, invalid. So what we have to write over here, we are using the spy on emit, and then here we are creating our controls, finding our control, username and password. Here we are putting the username as a Kumar and password I'm going to put the blank, and then I'm going to submit our component. And what is our expectation? Emit should not, okay, not to have been called. And here we are going to use dot to have been called, and we are not going to pass any parameter over here. So that's all. Now let's see how much code coverage is being done by our test cases. Now let me open another terminal here, and here we are going to write the command ng test code coverage. Now here we are seeing several errors. So if you see here, can't bind the form group since it is not a known property. Okay, so basically here we have not added our reactive form module. So here we have to give our imports, and we have to add our reactive form module. Okay, it should be forms, imported from Angular forms. Yep. So if you see now, all of our test cases is being passed, and we have covered our 100% code coverage. Okay, now if you see the karma here, if you see, let me expand it. And if you see for the login component, all the test cases are being successfully passed. Even the test cases from our entire application is also being completely passed. So far we have covered for our unit testing as well as integration testing, and we have also covered how to write the unit test cases, and I tried to cover most of the test cases scenario that is required in our application. Now further quickly I'm going to show you how to do the end-to-end testing. Basically before Angular 12 we were having already protractor inside our Angular framework in order to do the E2E testing, but now they have removed. Now we have to do it manually. So let's start it. So here I'm just going to write ng E2E. So it's going to configure our package for E2E. And if you see here, we have an option for no, and then we have Cypress, Nightwatch, and WebDriver IO. So from here, they have removed the protractor also. Nowadays, Cypress is being used widely. So I'm going to use Cypress here. I can close the other files from here. So it's asking to install the package. Yes. Now let's install it. So our package is getting installed. It will take some time. So yeah, package installed. Now would you like to add Cypress component testing? Yes. So now once package is getting installed, you can see here there is a Cypress folder is created. Inside Cypress, if you see, there is a folder created as E2E, and inside that we have our spec file. This is a spec file which is going to be executed once we are going to execute our E2E testing. Okay, now let me run it quickly. So in order to run that, we have to just ng E2E. Now it's compiled successfully, and now it's going to launch our Cypress tool. I'll be removing from here. It should goes to the default page. First of all, it should goes to the default author, and then I will wait for the some time. So Cypress dot wait for, I'll wait for 5 seconds, and then I will visit to the my login page. So this is basically, if you see, this is the test suite, my first test, and it inside it we are going to write our test cases similarly that we have written in our Jasmine file, right? So now if you see our Cypress here, it's asking to start E2E testing in Chrome. So I'll go with the Chrome now. Now if I test it, now it's visiting to the author page. If you see, now I'm able to see the author data. After 5 seconds, it's going to redirect to our login page. So in this, similarly, we can write here all the test cases, and that is going to be automated in our E2E testing. So now in this way, we can test our complete functionality for our entire application. So this is the way that we are using our E2E testing, but mostly this task is being done by our tester. I hope you understand about unit testing, integration testing, and E2E testing, and how to write the unit test cases. So if you have gone through this video from beginning to the end, then I'm pretty much sure now you would be able to confident about writing the test cases, and you will be able to answer about any questions related from our unit testing. And friends, if you have not subscribed my channel, please subscribe it and don't forget to press the bell icon so you will get the notification of all of my upcoming videos. And please like, comment and share with the people who really need it. I'll see you in my next video next week. Till then, take care and keep learning. Thanks for watching.